Ash, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, yesterday, in what can only be described as a very sort of low-key announcement, but which didn't really surprise anybody, Nicola Sturgeon and her husband Peter Murrell have decided to end their marriage in the midst of an embezzlement probe. She says, basically, she wanted to tell everybody else what they knew and what many of her friends knew for a very long time. It's a curious way to announce it, wasn't it?
Well, the timing is, of course, always interesting with these type of announcements, but there had been a little bit more going on over the weekend, which you may have seen as well. Nicola had given an interview where she seemed to be saying some things about Alex Salmond, you know, saying that he wasn't a very nice person to work with, and that she had sort of, I believe she was saying something along the lines of that she'd sort of warned him leaving her life, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Since Alex Salmond is now dead and he cannot respond to any kind of allegations about him, his family were quite distressed by that, and his wife Moira put out a statement to that effect. Nicola then received, quite a bit of backlash, I think it's fair to say, on the social media platforms for doing that. And then a day or so later, she releases this statement. So it certainly moved that on a bit, if you like.
Yes.
But I would imagine there's something in here to do with her creating a sense of distance from her soon-to-be, I guess, ex-husband.
Yes, soon-to-be ex-husband, who is, of course, under investigation, as indeed is she, in this very long-running police investigation into the SNP and missing funds and all kinds of different shenanigans, which involved, of course, having their house searched as well, didn't it?
Yes, that was very public. Peter Murrell was actually charged with embezzlement quite a long time ago now. It's well over a year. So I think there is a sense in Scotland that really this case should be coming to some sort of a conclusion now, and we should, understanding as the members of the public, I think, are very keen to know what might be happening with this. But so far, nothing more has happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating piece in the Mail today down here, tantalising clues into what really lies behind the sudden breakup of the very odd couple who ruled Scotland with an iron fist. And it is a kind of pretty ignominious end for her, really, isn't it? Considering that only a few years ago she was considered to be one of the great leaders of the Western world. She was, along with people like Jacinda Ardern and Justin Trudeau, thought to be the new funny vanguard of sort of the left in a way, and it all fell apart so quickly.
Well, she was a very successful politician, and nobody could argue with that. She won election after election, and she was at, the height of her powers for quite a long time, really, in a political context. But they say, don't they, that all political careers end in failure? Yeah. And this is a perfect example of that. However, I think the interest and the potential wrongdoing that is hanging over the Scottish National Party, and perhaps linked to Peter, perhaps it goes further, that is something that I don't think many politicians would be, want to have as part of their legacy. Yeah.
And I mean, you may or may not want to get into this particular scenario, but there's been an awful lot of rumours about Nicola Sturgeon's private life, which has suggested that she hasn't really had a proper marriage to her husband for quite a long time. She's good friends with Val McDermid. There's talk of her having another house that exists somewhere in the central belt of Scotland. I mean, is she ever going to sort of come out and talk about that, do you think?
I have no idea. There's certainly rumours abound about certain people in Scottish politics, and Nicola would certainly be one of them. I don't know any more about the detail of that.
But, her legacy will be what then? Because you say she was a very successful politician, but she was a very successful politician until she made what many might regard as a sort of fatal error of getting into a coalition government with the Greens and Patrick Harvey, which was the beginning of the end, really, wasn't it?
I would say so. I didn't vote for that. So they released the numbers afterwards, and obviously the politicians got a vote, the parliamentary group, both at Westminster, at that time there was a lot of them, and the ones at Holyrood, and also the membership. And apparently 95% of the SNP voted for that deal, but I was one of the 5% that didn't, because I could see the problems ahead with it. In terms of politics, if you are a successful politician, you reach the height of your career, which in the case of Scottish politicians would be becoming First Minister, and you maintain that position for a long time, you are, I think it's objectively a successful politician. However, in the case of the Scottish National Party, you know, the job of the leader of the Scottish National Party is not necessarily to just become a successful politician. The job there is to get Scotland becoming an independent country, is to get Scotland, you know, to become away from the UK, a country in its own right. And she failed dismally on that count.
Yes. And the landscape for Scotland now is different as well since she left, because it looks as though Labour might be making a resurgence. I know you guys are hoping that that doesn't happen, but what does it look like for you in 2026 when when the Scottish Parliament elections are taking place? Will Labour become the number one party again in Scotland?
Well, it was looking very like the Labour Party were going to do better. They certainly were looking better in the polls. And then Starmer took office in London. And obviously, he's only been in power there for about 6 months. And he's made a series of disastrous decisions, which have led to Labour sort of dropping in the polls. And Scottish Labour are not immune to that either. They're come out and distance themselves from some of the policies. In some cases, they're diametrically opposed to some of the policies that Starmer has taken on. So you can see there's confusion there. They're not linked, and a sense that having a Labour government in London, which I think Scottish Labour were desperate for, hasn't turned out to be quite the blessing that they thought it would be. So yes, at the moment, the SNP are running a minority administration. We do have the budget coming up shortly. The Labour Party have indicated that they'll abstain, which means the budget will pass. So they seem to be managing to run a minority administration at the moment. My preference is that that happens. My view was that in a parliament that was set up really to cater to minorities, and it was meant to be on more of the European style, not like Westminster, where it was a parliament that had lots of smaller parties all working together for the common good of Scotland. It hasn't always worked out like that. And when the SNP were in a majority administration, as you rightly say, with the Green Party, I felt that that meant that the government have to listen to the public. So that was things like, the bottle return scheme, which cost an awful lot of money and hasn't really been resolved. Gender reforms, which the public hated, but the Parliament pushed it through anyway. It had to be, in the end, it was stopped by the Conservatives in London, and a whole myriad of other things. So my view is it's much better when governments have to seek agreement across the Parliament. It makes for better policy. And in the end, I think better legislation comes from that.
Yeah, I think so. Good to talk to you, Ash. Thank you very much indeed. Ash Regan, MSP for Eastern Edinburgh Alba Party there. The statement from Nicola Sturgeon, some people have said, of course, that she has now finally achieved some level of independence. She didn't get it for the country, but she got it for herself. To all intents and purposes, we've been separated for some time, she said, and we feel it is time now to bring others up to speed with where we are. It's kind of an odd thing to say, isn't it? But, that's the end of Nicola Sturgeon. How will she be remembered? Probably not very fondly by anyone. And it is pretty low to start attacking and continuing to attack Alex Salmond now that he's no longer with us. Pretty bad news.